mother to her child and invites us to be changed. Amen. Well, I hope you were able to picture in the gospel reading this morning how brilliant of a scene it was up there on the mountaintop. If you've heard a few Transfiguration Sunday sermons, you may have heard about, like, how to get these clothes so white. What does that even look like? And when I was trying to imagine how brilliant Jesus could have looked, kind of thinking of that Orbitz gum commercial with the sparkle, or like a shaker dress from the 60s. I mean, I was just trying to imagine, what would that have been like? This glory, this shining, this scene before them. Well, here they were, up on a mountaintop with clouds and a loud voice and this shining Jesus before them, who seemed just to be changed in this moment. And in good religious tradition, you can imagine then that something was going to happen. This was a moment of divine revelation. Well, in the Christian mystic tradition, this is one of the scriptures they talk about as being a moment when actually the disciples were changed, not Jesus. It was actually the disciples' eyes who were opened to see Jesus fully as the divine Son of God. And it was the disciples who would be changed by that moment, that close encounter and connection with God forever. I've had a few of those transfiguration experiences in my life. Some were in these dramatic moments on a retreat or from my charismatic days, but actually most of them were gradual. They didn't involve light or clouds or a loud voice from heaven. They actually just involved ordinary people and everyday events. One of those experiences for me was when I worked at a perinatal substance abuse recovery center. I spent weekends and evenings and holidays with these women who were there learning how to live differently and not numb themselves with addictions. They were there with the hope to be reunified with their kids. As a staff member there, I was a minority in every way. I was white, I was a Christian, I was educated, married without kids, I'd never been to jail or prison or been arrested. I was what was called a normie, and I hadn't even tried drugs. I think you can kind of get the picture. My coworkers, by contrast, were a mix of women who had children. There were African American women, Latinas of various descent, atheists, Mormons, and my closest coworkers were Mormons and Buddhists. And they were all committed to sharing their life stories as part of their ongoing recovery. I remember some of my coworkers actually carried pictures of themselves when they were in prison to just show what it was like to be called by a number for so many years instead of by a name. The stories that I heard in our group, we had weekly staff group therapy, and some of the stories that I heard, I could not even imagine, to be honest. Very humbling. Well, there was one resident who later became staff that I grew close to in particular. I'll just call her Ree. Early on, I would spend time reading stories with her daughter, helping her clean her house, taking her shopping. We just talked about everything. And it was actually Ree who told me that when I first came to the program, the residents thought that I was an undercover FBI agent. I don't know where that came from, but anyway. And after a while, when she came on staff, her daughter would actually come and stay with Paul, husband Paul, and I. And you should have seen me trying to figure out how to do her hair and trying to make her drink milk every day for strong bones. And her mom, Reese, was very humorously and gently schooling me on the error of my ways. I mean, seriously, I really had no idea what I was doing in our relationship. A lot of very dumb stuff. Even some hurtful stuff, in my amazing state of ignorance and my genuine desire to help her live into my understanding of what it means to be healthy. For example, this one time I took her grocery shopping, and she was putting all this meat into the grocery cart, and not just some packets of meat, like big pieces of meat. And here I was saying, you shouldn't eat so much meat. In fact, you shouldn't eat it at all. She was very gracious again, and just matter-of-factly said, you know, for my health and from my own cultural experiences, we cook a little differently than maybe we do at home. She was very gracious. Despite my earnest and misplaced energies, you can maybe imagine that Ree loved me, and she told me so often. We cried together, we laughed together, we even yelled at each other sometimes, and in our own ways we also prayed for each other. And then one day I realized that all the Christian rules that I had grown up with were meaningless next to the kind of love that Ree was showing me. She was showing me the bottomless love and grace of God that whole time, and I did not even know it. God, through Ree, was loving me, and I was changed. Professor Breen Brown, or Bryn Brown, I was thinking maybe one of you might know how to say her name, but if you've ever heard her speak, one of the things she talks about is imperfection and vulnerability. And on a seminar from TED, has anybody heard of TED? They are a resource for research and ideas, new ideas in technology, entertainment, design. And they posted one of her seminars called The Power of Vulnerability. My sister sent it to me recently, and I just want to share some of what she offered, because I realized it was this relationship with my friend Ree that God worked through, and it worked because we found ourselves able to be vulnerable with each other in our sharing, in our hoping, in our fears, in our sorrows, and in our hopes. Professor Brown, kind of jumping back to what she talks about in The Power of Vulnerability, she noticed in her research that the people who have the strongest sense of belonging, who have the strongest sense of feeling loved, who have the strongest sense of self-worth, also had the courage to be imperfect, to fully embrace vulnerability. Vulnerability, she continued, is necessary for connection to happen. We need to allow ourselves to be seen, really seen. Yikes. I don't know about you, but being vulnerable seems kind of countercultural. Even in the church, where we have many values that are countercultural, we spend a lot of time building and maintaining walls. Not just healthy boundaries, but walls to protect ourselves from hurt. But what we're really doing is protecting ourselves from the difficult journey together in the way of the cross to discovering the healing of resurrection. Brown outlined how we would rather just numb ourselves, hold on to prideful certainty or perfection, cast blame, or simply pretend or deny there's nothing wrong. But instead, she encourages us to let ourselves be seen, deeply seen, vulnerably seen, to learn to love with our whole hearts, to practice gratitude and joy, and to believe that we are enough. Carl Gregg calls this practicing transfiguration. He describes it as the practice of allowing the light of God's love to shine through us, of gently letting go of our ego, the masks we wear, our busyness, and our distractions. Practices of prayer, presence, and worship open us from our isolation to connect us with God and with each other. We each reflect different aspects of the image of God, and practicing transfiguration allows God's image to shine more brilliantly through us in all our uniqueness and diversity, and I would add, imperfections. This turning in the season from Epiphany, following Jesus from birth to adulthood, to now following Jesus in the way of the cross, and into Lent, what we call Lent. I just want to offer this last reflection from Marianne Williamson's book, A Return to Love. It was one of the wisdom bits that we reflected on as ordinands in the January ordination retreat. Very neat experience. maybe share more about later. And I apologize if you've heard it before, but I think it's very much worth repeating. To say it one more way. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We are born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us. It's not in those of us who wear a stole. It's in all of us. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fears, our presence automatically liberates others. Ash Wednesday and Lent kind of popularly elicit a sense of unworthiness, but to be honest, I don't really agree with that part of our tradition. And I'm not alone. There are a number of people who have worked to recover the biblically based belief that we are worthy. We think of Genesis, and God created humans and said, very good. God invites us to live into our worthiness as God's children. So perhaps when you're receiving ashes of humanity this Wednesday, I hope you will find yourself in that group of Professor Browns who believes that you are loved by God and you are called by name and you are worthy. And rooted in this love, that we may find the courage to make that vulnerable but transforming journey to connect with God and with each other. It's risky stuff. It's just, from my own relationship with Ree, it can be hard and it can feel humbling and it can feel like carrying a cross of sorts, but it's worth it. And I'm just wondering this morning if there are any takers.